Prepare yourself for the terror. The prison of madness, where few enter and none return.
Welcome to Unsung Horrors with Lance and Erica.
Leave all your sanity behind. It can't help you now.
Welcome to another episode of Unsung Horrors, the podcast where we review underseen horror movies, specifically those which have fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. I'm Erica.
And I'm Lance.
And we have a very special guest for this episode today. We're going to be diving into some Mexican horror, and there is no better guest for us to have than Abraham Castillo Flores. Welcome, Abraham.
Welcome.
Thank you guys so much. I'm so excited to be with you, both Eric and Lance. I'm a big fan of the work that you guys do. I know you like to deep dive into the darkest realms of unseen films, and I'm delighted to bring the torch so we can discover some wonders of the Black Pit of Dr. M.
Yes.
Also known as Misterios de Ultratumba.
Yes.
It sounds so much better when you say it. I'm glad you did that before I jumped into that. Before we get into the film, though, I did want to give listeners a little bit more information about you. So, number one, and I think I mentioned this at the end of our last episode, for our listeners, Abraham is the reason that Lance and I will nonstop tell you people to watch The Ship of Monsters, because
100%.
Pure joy, that movie.
Yeah,
It is
unforgettable
the best
experience at Fantastic Fest.
Yeah. Love it so much. And Abraham brought that to Fantastic Fest along with a couple of other films. If you're having a bad day, just put that movie on and you will immediately feel better.
80 minutes of just pure joy.
Yeah. And we have you to thank for that, Abraham. So thank you again.
Thank you. I am so delighted that you guys, are still so keen on that movie. And I believe that The Ship of Monsters is one of our most important cultural ambassadors. Where can you get aliens, Venusian cosmonauts and a singing cowboy? It's like...
Yeah, it's all there. It's the
robots falling in love with jukeboxes.
Oh my God, it's the greatest love story ever told. And I love it. So on top of you bringing us pure joy, you also... I know you run the Morbido, the film festival. Are you like film programmer for that?
I'm the director of programming.
Okay.
And I basically oversee all the behind the scenes stuff for making sure the films get there.
Great. That's awesome.
So I like to say that from the moment we love them to the moment that our audience sees them on screen, me and my wonderful team make sure that it happens.
And that happens in Mexico City, correct?
It happens in Mexico City during the Day of the Dead festivities, which is usually from the 28th of October to the first week of November. Sometimes we go a little crazier in dates, but now with the world being so full of nice things, it's hard to plan.
Right. Yeah. Are there plans for it again this year, assuming everything goes okay?
Everything's on. We actually did a 2020 edition. We had to move it to December because of all the first chapter of the COVID craziness.
Yeah.
Last year we went back to our regular dates, and this year we're standing on the normal dates again for Day of the Dead dates. And in case something crazy happens, well, I'm sure we'll adapt.
All right. Sounds good. So you also have a couple of contributions to some Blu-ray releases from Indicator coming out. Do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. If anybody's interested in, old Mexican horror cinema, on March, Indicator series is coming out with La Llorona, the 1933 film, which was the first feature film to have La Llorona character, and a 1934 film called The Phantom of the Monastery, which has phantom monks and a woman that wants to bring two best friends into sin and to murder each other.
I love it. I'm into it.
If our listeners are interested in watching, these are the two first Mexican horror feature films, and there's tons of stories behind them. And I think it's very interesting to see that right at the beginning of there's an incredible connection between Dracula and these films, the Mexican version. So the Spanish version that they did in the Universal Studios at the same time. So yeah, it's very interesting how everything kind of melds. So coming up in March from Indicator series.
Awesome. I'm glad to see some of these films finally getting some Blu-ray releases. We did a Blu-ray wish list episode last year, I think, and so one of Lance's picks for it was The Ship of Monsters, and then I sort of piggybacked on that. I cheated. I didn't do just like one movie pick. I cheated, and I was like, I want a box set, and I want a golden age of Mexico, like call it Mexico Dorado or something like that, and have 4 or 5 films in there. I mentioned you specifically, Abraham, as being a contributor to it, and I would love to see something like that, like a box set with a bunch of these films all in one.
Oh, we're working so hard to bring them, to do at least different boxes, and it's just the rights to so many of these movies are like scattered all over, so it's quite an ordeal. But one of my missions right now is to do that. So I'm very happy that the Indicator kind of they got a good bunch of Mexican films, of horror Mexican films, and so they're going to be releasing them. I'm not at liberty, unfortunately, to mention the other titles, but there will be some good surprises, and I'm working on them getting more. So
Excellent.
That's exciting.
Yeah, looking forward to that for sure. Well, I know you can't spoil it in case the movie we're talking about is getting one of those, I can hope. But we do have a DVD release of The Black Pit of Dr. M. Unfortunately, it's from Casa Negra, which is now out of business. The DVD is out of print and ridiculously overpriced, people, unfortunately. The movie is on Tubi and on YouTube, but that's only for our Spanish-speaking audience because there's no English subs on those. If you have the DVD, that's great. If you really need a copy with English subs, feel free to message me and I'll figure out a way to get that to you because I want people to see it. So,
listeners, please take that what she just said. Very important. Listen to her. Yes, everybody should watch this movie.
So as Abraham mentioned, Black Pit of Dr. M, aka Mysterious. I don't want to say it. Can you say the proper name of it for me?
Misterios de Ultratumba.
Thank you. So much better when he says it. From 1959. As of this recording, it has 513 views on Letterboxd, and I hope to see that number go way up after this.
Yes.
So we're going to jump into some of the film specifics. We'll start with the crew. Director is Fernando Mendes, and he spent over 30 years of his career as a writer and director. He's got about 30 to 40 films to his credit as a director, including comedies and westerns. The majority of them were in the 1950s. Among his film credits, I'm going to say the English version of these, and then I'll let Abraham jump in and talk about them in their proper names. But Body Thief, The Vampire, The Vampire's Coffin. I know, Lance, you watched The Vampire.
I did. I watched it without subtitles.
You're dedicated, and I appreciate you and love you for that.
Well, I started playing it, and then I didn't realize there were no subtitles, but immediately the score and then just the cinematography, I was already sold and devoted, so I just kept it rolling until the end.
Good stuff. He also directed The Living Coffin and El Suavecito. So, Abraham, you mentioned when we talked previously about this film in particular, El Suavecito, and I don't think I'm spoiling anything.
No, you're not. No. It's
okay.
Well, before we go into Suavecito now, don't forget, I promise, it's just Fernando Mendes, I think, is one of the most important genre filmmakers in Mexico. And although he's being, he's getting a little bit more love these days, he used to be considered like a second-tier director. It's important, Lance just said it. He was seduced by The Vampire. His Vampiro is still considered the most important horror film made in Mexico, still to this date. Not only because it was very popular, but it got a lot of love overseas, which was very uncommon for Mexican films of that time. What I love about the work of Fernando Mendes is that he studied painting before doing film. He studied painting. He was a good friend of David Alfaro Siqueiros, who became one of the most important painters in Mexico. Then he went to the USA in 29, I'm sorry. And he worked there as a producer, screenwriter, soundman, and as a makeup man in one of these Hollywood Hispanic films that they did, something called Contraband. that was directed by his cousin Alberto Mendes Bernal. And this was the Spanish version of an American film, Contraband. The movie didn't do very well, but he stayed there. And, then he worked for a gentleman called Dwayne Esper, who did a lot of exploitation movies in the 30s. He has something called Maniac. And then another film from 36 called Marijuana, the weed with roots in hell.
Oh, yeah.
What title.
And they did the makeup for that, for those two films.
Oh, okay.
And I think it's important to Mr. Mendes was one of those filmmakers that when he came into Mexico, he already had a background and had, learned his trade in the US. And he brought a lot of technique and a lot of stuff at a moment in Mexican cinema where people like that were needed. And they were very important in constructing a national film industry. For some reason, he doesn't get that. He never gets mentioned in this wave of people that came over. But I think he was very important. And he very quickly got a job as a screenwriter because I think he was a fantastic screenwriter. And he polished a film in 1936 called El Super Loco, which is actually a parody for the Mad Scientist films that they were doing in Hollywood at the time. Mm. By 1939, he made a film called La Reina de México about the Virgin of Guadalupe, and he has his first feature film in 1941. And from then on, he didn't stop. He got very hot as a screenwriter because he did a film called Los Tres Garcia, which was super important box office hit. And kind of from then on, he kept doing a lot of action films, westerns. He was really good with westerns, but he was still considered like second-tier director. And eventually he did the El Suavecito in 1950s, which is the movie I mentioned. El Suavecito is one of Guillermo del Toro's most favorite film of all times from Mexico. He was actually the one who made sure they restored the movie. They brought it back, and it's getting a release by Criterion, if I'm not mistaken, very soon. So to all listeners, they want to watch Mexican film noir by the director of Black Bit of Dr. M. El Suavecito is it.
I'm excited for that.
Yeah, definitely. And just before we finish with Mr. Mendes, one of the things he did is he has a film that he did in 1956, The Body Snatcher, Ladrón de Cadáveres. I think you gave it another title, The Body Thief, I think?
Yeah, that's what it's got multiple titles, but yours is much better.
So that one is super important in 1956 just for two things. That's the first Mexican film that mixes luchadores, the wrestlers, and horror. So it started, it kind of like jump-started a branch of the genre that would define the Mexican presence in horror throughout the world. Also, in that film, he worked with Victor Herrera, the cinematographer, and Gunther Herzog, the art director. They crafted a film that is, it's super outlandish. The film, it mixes Frankenstein, King Kong, and luchadores. And of course, with that mix, you can imagine the results. It's quite nuts, but it's actually fantastic, wonderful. And as I said, it opened up a branch of a genre, a subgenre of sorts that I think we exploited with fantastic results.
Yeah, there's this period of, when specifically the El Santo when Kay Gordon Murray bought them and brought them into America, it was, I think, Samson versus whatever it may be. There is so many El Santo versus X, El Santo versus this, and so many of them, they just look like they're so much fun. I've seen a few. I saw one like weird time traveling one.
That's the one with the El Tesoro de Dracula.
Yes.
That movie that you mentioned, that's actually super fun. There's a funny story because at the same time that they did the black and white version, they did a color version. And in the color version, there were nude shots. And that version only went to Europe. And it was one of the big mysteries because for many years it was lost. And there was actually people that said that it did not exist. And when they finally unearthed that movie, the son of El Santo stopped the screening because he said he didn't want the legacy of his father to be tarnished by some breasts. Imagine that.
Oh, I mean,
exactly.
we can get over that now, I think.
Exactly my feeling as well as many fans.
Yeah.
And just so that we finish and we don't spend all the program on the biography of Mr. Mendes, one of the interesting things is as he got very popular after El Vampiro, and he was getting more offers to direct, and things were going good. But his health started declining, and he had to stop directing films because he had a couple of heart attacks almost back to back, and that slowed his career down. He kept doing screenwriting, but he took on one of his hobbies to make a living after he had to stop directing movies, which was growing orchids. And he ended up being one of the most important people of doing growing orchids in all of Latin America. And I find that fascinating. That he couldn't do movies, became one of the top orchid men in the world.
I think it might have come up in the commentary on the DVD. It's by Frank Coleman. And he mentioned that, after he left directing, he was still writing, but he actually became a designer of public parks and was really into like flora and fauna. And he even pointed it out in Black Pit of Dr. M, how it's, got this very sort of lush courtyard or hacienda. And
Exactly.
I didn't even notice that until, because I was so like fog and, fixated on that. Like I wasn't even thinking about it, but yeah, it's beautiful.
There's a funny story that they say that he was a very, funny man and with weird interests. And the producer of the film mentions in his biography that at some point in his life, Fernando Mendes was obsessed with getting discarded envelopes that had the post stamp for 1 cent, and that he was crazy about it, and he collected them. But then afterwards, the post office kind of discarded that. I mean, it went out of print, that one, and that Fernando Mendes made tons of money out of selling those because he had collected so many of them, of the 1 cent post stamp.
Interesting.
That's so funny.
Stamp collections always pay off.
I know. That's why I was like, man, we got to get into the post stamps again.
Yeah. You had already kind of mentioned it with one of Mendes's films that he collaborated with cinematographer Victor Herrera. Can you talk a little bit about him?
Yes, he's one of the main contributions of this in this film is like, I think the high contrast photography that Herrera brings to this movie makes it so special, and it's bold and crazy. And he did over almost 170 films, and he worked with like top people like Roberto Gabaldon, who did Macario, Gilberto Martinez Solares, and with him he only did The Body Snatcher, which we talked about. He did The Coffin of the Vampire, which is the sequel to the Vampire. But he shot A Skeleton of Dr. Morales, which we all love here.
Yes.
And he also, that same year, he shot another movie called The Mysteries of Black Magic, which is also one of my favorites. And I'll talk about the connection that he has with this film later on. But I think this is a man that understood, he understood the power of high contrast photography and was not afraid to go to the extremes, especially in his horror films. I think all his horror titles really show that he liked to go bold. He has a title from 1953, which is called The Resuscitated Monster, which is the story of a disfigured doctor that gets in touch with a beautiful journalist, and she falls in love, and it's a super tortured love story. But he also has this very scarred, deformed face. So as I said, the connections are very strange, and this guy, I think, did a tremendous job. And just to go on how he's not afraid of going expressionistic, in terms of photography, he started his first credit as a DP was under Juan Bustillo de Oro, who was a director, very important Mexican film director. He loved German expressionism, and every film he tried to do, Juan Bustillo de Oro tried to use as much as possible. Unfortunately, it was like all those films were box office bombs, and he was forced to get away from that type of filmmaking. But I'm sure that Herrera absorbed some of that love, but because it shows.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the German expressionism element of it. There's another film that, and I'm not sure if there's a connection between it too, but there's one moment in particular. I'm jumping ahead to talking about the film, but when they're in it's like the nightclub, when they first meet it, and it's like very minimalistic. It reminded me a lot of another film that I watched, and I completely lost it. I think it's The Man Without the Face.
Exactly. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's very interesting that you mentioned this, because I think there, for example, is not only Victor Herrera, but also Gunther Herzog, the art director, for the production designer for this film. And I think it's important that we mention how these three people, the director, the production designer Gunter Gerso and the cinematographer worked together because Gunter Gerso was not only a great art director, he was one of the most important abstract painters in Mexico. And he was in close contact with the surrealists in Mexico, Leonora Carrington and Remedios Varo. And all the stuff that, remember how you mentioned about the trees and all the lush garden in the middle of the asylum? You can see all these crooked trees and everything. And if you see Gunter Gerso's paintings, you will see he's very much into geometry and abstract painting. And there's a lot, I think, that works on that. And also that nightclub, which I love that they call it the concert cafe, because I imagine that in the 19th century there were no cabarets, or at least not with that name. They call it the concert cafe. It looks like a Giorgio di Chirico painting. No, it has this very surrealistic, even with it's as abstract as it is. And I mean, you can tell it's a soundstage, but it has this otherworldly feeling. No, that you almost want to go to that concert cafe because it just feels so weird.
Yeah, I'm into it. Like, I don't need a bunch of stuff on the wall. Just, I'm in this like empty void and just watching these women dance. I'm into it.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's touch on the screenwriter here, Ramon Oban.
Ramon was a very interesting man. He comes from Costa Rica, if I'm not mistaken. And he came to Mexico. He was brought up to Mexico by the Calderon family, who were film producers. They're responsible for the Aztec Mummy series, and and all the Rumbera movies. They brought him to Mexico, and Ramon Oban was very talented, very fast. He had a problem though. In the memoirs of Alfredo Ripstein, the producer of the films, he says that his problem was that he needed pills to get up in the morning and pills to get to sleep. So he said the problem was meeting deadlines. Deadlines was not his specialty. And he said he liked to work with him very much, but that was kind of one of the upsides. And he tells a story that he once got him a job doing a film, and when they had to show up for the script, Ramon Oban had nothing. But he went into the meeting anyways, and he started telling the producers the story, and he pretended to read out loud 14 pages of a script that he had not written. out of his head, just on the wind. And the producer mentions this, and he said he was very talented, and he said that he was very sad that he couldn't do more. And he actually wrote 3 cowboy movies that Fernando Mendes directed, and that propelled the career of one of the actors of the movie. We'll go about that later. He did a ton of genre movies, but I think we should remember mostly for the vampire. He did the vampire and the coughing of the vampire. And you know what? Would you know what was the last name of the film? The last film he wrote, Death Arrives on Time.
Oh, that's a little bit
crazy,
too
right?
on the nose there.
I know, but it was a very weird detail. But yeah, that was the last screenplay he wrote,
Okay.
La Muerte Puntual. So yeah, on his case, it arrived on time.
A couple of earlier ones that Oban had worked on. I do have The World of the Vampires, El Mundo de los Vampires, Vampiros, and one I watched that was like a Creature from the Black Lagoon sort of knockoff called Swamp of the Lost Monster.
Exactly, yes.
Which was fun. I was a little disappointed in the ending. It was a little Scooby-Doo for me, but it was fun.
I love the Scooby-Doo ending.
I know you do.
I think he had. You can see, some of the stuff in the screenplay in this one for the movie we're watching. I mean, some of the turns are like really violent. Not violent. They're just like a little, crazy, and so and they just go hyperspace. But I think they saved him basically with the mise-en-scène and how they worked out and the intensity of some of the actors that really saved the day. And although I think people have to remember, these movies were done fast. And also when they were writing, the assignments were not that ample for like rewrites and that kind of stuff.
One other person I did want to make sure to touch on is the composer for this film, Gustavo Cesar Carrion. I think I said that as best as I can. He's got hundreds of film credits. He did pretty much, I think he pretty much did almost every Mexican horror movie of this time. Am I?
It's actually funny that you mentioned he has 346 credits. Can you imagine
That's
that?
insane. That's like
And
Morricone levels of like credits.
And I mean, he did four horror titles for Fernando Mendes. He did El Vampiro, El Ataúd del Vampiro, The Living Coffin. He also did the music for The Mysteries of the Black Magic, which was the movie I was telling you about that
Mhm.
also has Victor Herrera. And it's in the 70s that he did tons of wrestling movies, tons of them. And it's in that period, I think, that he did some of his more interesting work because he started experimenting with electronic music. And a lot of the Santo scores that got, I think, a lot very popular, and people remember Santo by, they were the work of Mr. Carrion. At the beginning of his career, which, as we saw, was very, very wide. He was very good at doing copies of certain styles and adapting to all the different genres.
Mhm.
So I think he's remembered as a very versatile, very hard worker. And but I think, seeing his work now in perspective, we should remember him for experimenting at the end with the 70s onwards, all the crazy sounds that you hear from horror movies in Mexico. He was responsible for those.
I think one of the ones that Lance, you watched this one too, The Curse of the Crying Woman.
Yeah.
So good.
Beautiful, isn't it?
The eye makeup on it, it's one of those things, and I think Laird mentioned this. We have a friend, Laird, previous guest, and he mentioned in his review that, having it be just this sort of, I don't want to call it cheap because I don't want that to have a negative connotation, but it's that those black eyes are so much more haunting than anyone who's spending thousands of dollars on other kind of makeup. Those eyes, I was just like, oh my God.
Well,
Let me tell you the story about how that came along. Rita Macedo, the actress who plays Selma, the woman who gets the eyes like that, she cut black velvet from one of her dresses, and she was the one who said, "We have to do the makeup like this." And on top of that, you paid me the makeup, but it's black velvet from one of her dresses.
That's amazing.
The two actresses from that movie were pregnant at the time they were shooting it. So during the day, they would shoot the movie, and on the days off, they would go to prenatal classes together.
Oh,
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
But yet, add on to Gustavo Carrion, his music works so well with those twisted trees and the fog-filled streets and those dark shadows. He just elevates and accentuates that haunting feeling.
My one comment on that is I think they overused the theme. They should have given him a little bit more money so he composed a few variations. It's because they did go a bit repetitive on the theme, which is gorgeous. But
It is, yeah.
The 10th time you hear it, you're like, okay, we got it.
I mean, there are some lovely melodies sprinkled
Yeah.
out. Like when Patricia's talking to Jimenez and stuff. There is some really good, lovely melodies. But it does focus in on his tense and eerie work. Very Hammer-like. I mean, James Bernard gets so much, accolades and notoriety for all the Hammer films he did and all the UK films. But yeah, Carrion, I feel like all the people that distribute the vinyl soundtracks and original scores like Waxwork Records, Mondo, Death Waltz, they should be releasing Gustavo Carrion stuff. And I don't see it out there.
They should get their hands on this.
100%.
Because there's haunting work and beautiful work on this.
Yeah, it's great stuff. It's like you mentioned using the certain cues in it, like the organ when there's the soap opera sort of melodramatic moments of dialogue happening between people, but when there's some sort of tragic or horrific moment, like when Elmer gets the acid in his face, the orchestral cues just boom and dun, dun. It's so good.
I think they really sunk their teeth into making a Gothic experience. This idea of trying to find what's beyond death, and even though some of the plot things don't get developed that much, they really work the atmosphere. There's always this deep fog and the crooked trees, and you can see you hear the wind, and there's only a day shot, and it's in a cemetery. Which I find that amazing, and kind of out in the forest. But all of the movie's dark, no?
Yeah.
You feel like I don't know, you feel like a presence of the darkness and of night, which I think helps propel the whole craziness of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any other crew members that you wanted to touch on before we move on to
Before we
production?
move on, I just a little thing about the producer. I think it's Mr. Alfredo Ripstein and Cesar Gaston Santos. The company who made this film, Alameda Films, is I think it's an important company because it still exists to this day, and it's a family adventure. I would say the Ripstein family is still going strong. The brand is now run by the great son of Mr. Ripstein, and his partner, Cesar Gaston Santos, he was the manager of the film studios. And he actually kind of gave him, when Mr. Alfredo Ripstein wanted to go, he was a very good production manager. And then at some point he said, I'm going to start my own business. But he only had $200 on his pocket. And he went to Cesar Gaston Galindo and he said, man, I was like, I want to start my business. And he said, yeah, take an office. I won't charge you. Just go nuts. And they eventually partnered up and they make one of the companies that, they dwelled on almost every genre. And they tried to go on very commercial films, but they always kept like a certain quality and they had a very good eye. And I think they were instrumental. I should say that, for example, just of this century, Salma Hayek and Garcia Bernal, the actor, they both started in Alameda Films. So much to the testament of Don Alfredo, he knew what was good and what would work. I should mention, though, that at least on the case of Misterios de Ultratumba and all the Alameda films, one of the great things about this company is that they actually do take care of their films. Misterios de Ultratumba, it has an HD master, and he makes it available to film festivals and to showings in the States. I don't know how he's working on the video releases of them. He's very protective of the rights, but at least this film, along with the Witch's Mirror and the Vampire, he keeps them close by. But the good thing is that they're in perfect condition. They're not in 4K masters, but he has really good masters.
That's good. Yeah.
Of the Alameda films, and this one in particular, it wouldn't surprise me if we see this soon show up in Amazon or something quietly, because this one got released last year in all the Mexican platforms in HD. So hopefully it'll show up in the States very soon.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah. Because from what the commentary track on the DVD said that this film was imported into America, but the English dubbed version is lost. Like there are reports of it playing on TV in the 60s and 70s, but there's no evidence of if it was picked up by Murray. So it's kind of unclear who it did. Honestly, though, I don't care about the English language version. I'm glad that the original is being well cared for and that, fingers crossed, there's hope for another release of this at some point.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. No, I'm telling you, it's every time that someone asks me about highlights from Mexico, I mentioned this one. This one, as I said, is one of my favorites. It actually played last Halloween in the Red Cat Theater in Los Angeles as part of their, Halloween Day of the Dead celebration.
Oh, nice!
And I gave a lecture afterwards, which was online, about I called it the pentagram of Mexican horror cinema legends, and we talked about El Santo, La Llorona, the Devil, La Muerte, Death, and the Mummy, the Mexican Mummy. But I think this movie is, I think, an excellent ambassador. Also because I think to me at least, what strikes wonderful about this film is that it strays away from what most people think about Mexican horror cinema, which is the luchadores. No, this goes full Gothic. It has you can see all the European connections to more German expressionism, but of course the monkey's paw from W. Jacobs, the work of Poe, and then. I remember, if I'm not mistaken, there was someone in the 1850s called Agustin Calmet who wrote something called The Phantom World, and in there's a chapter called Examples of People Who Promise to Give Each Other News from the Phantom World After Death. I'm sure this is something that Romono read or knew about, and that's one of the that's kind of like the pillar, the pillar for the whole story to go on. And I remember about this film that I really love the character of Dr. Masali, the doctor that really wants to know what's beyond death, and his passion that just gets it eats him up, no? This obsession of his. It reminded me a lot about an expression that my grandfather used to have, which was people that spit to heaven, no? And it comes back. I think here in the States you say pissing in the wind,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
This comes back to you, no matter how much hard you try to piss to the wind or to spit up, it's just gravity fucking works. And it's so tragic and sad at the same time, because here a scientist that is trying to be all, he wants to find out and has an obsession, but the obsession ends up not only killing him but consuming him and debasing him to like the most to the lowest of obsessions. And he gets crazy about love, but then he gets crazy about wanting to know, and you see him go from this very composed figure to this like extravagant man who just cannot keep it together.
Yeah. So since we're on the topic of Dr. Mazzali, he's played by Raphael Bertrand, and he has a very mixed filmography. It's I didn't find too many, and it's a little bit all over the place.
All over the place is definitely right, but he played Zorro in, I think, in a couple of movies, if I'm not mistaken. And there's a title that, if you want to watch something that is actually exotic and very bizarre, where he appears also with Boris Karloff and Tongolele. It's called The Isle of the Snake People from 1971. And he appears in that film, and there's a black magic ceremony, and there's this woman called Tongolele, which is one of she was an American that made her career here in Mexico. She was a dancer, and she makes a voodoo dance there. That if anybody's interested in that kind of dance, they should watch it. Please.
I'm into it.
Highlight of Mr. Rafael Bertrand. And funny enough, he was that same year he shot a movie called La Edad de la Tentación, The Age of Temptation, which was kind of a film about teenage rebellion. And in that same movie, you can see Mappy Cortez, the woman who plays Patricia, and the other doctor, Dr. Jimenez. So it's funny that these three actors were in this like dark horror film, and they were in like a teenage rebellion movie.
Yeah.
Same year.
That's funny. So speaking of Mapita Cortez as Patricia, that's another one. She doesn't have too many film credits. She is gorgeous though, and beautiful body, beautiful dancer,
and her eyes. No, yeah. I think her eyes is just, there's something about her eyes that just no. And in black and white, I think, and with that kind of lighting, I think they just they grow on you, and they just it's a crazy attraction. Miss Mapita Cortez, she was born in Puerto Rico, and her aunt was a kind of well-known movie star from Puerto Rico, and she brought her over to Mexico. But before that, in 1957, Miss Mappy Cortez was Miss Puerto Rico, and she went to the Miss Universe contest. And then she moved with her aunt to Mexico, who was getting cinema roles. She enrolled to a school of acting, and a year after arriving, she got her film debut in 1957. So this is like right after she got here, she started getting film roles. But on 1960, she married Lucho Gatica, who was a Chilean singer, and her acting career was in pause for 20 years. So that's why she doesn't have that many film credits, unfortunately.
Okay, that makes sense.
Well, I mean, put on hold to, I guess, tour with her husband, or?
Yes, family? Exactly. Yeah. Tour with the husband, take care of the kids. But then they divorced, and after she divorced, she resumed her film career.
Yeah, good for her.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly what I said when I discovered that.
Yeah.
And just on a funny note, Mappy Cortez, before stopping her career, she was in two films with two of the stars from The Ship of Monsters. She appeared in a movie called Dormitorio para Señoritas with Lorena Velázquez, who plays the Venusian vampire.
Yeah.
Played with that. And then she was also with Ana Berta Lepe, the other Venusian cosmonaut, in something called Señoritas. So now that I know that you guys are fans, I wanted to mention that.
I'm like, when I'm going to be editing this, I'm going to be like, add to watch list, add to watch list. You know what I'll probably do for listeners? I'll probably like every film that we mention in this episode, I'll make a letterbox list for easy reference for folks.
Wonderful. Yeah. Mention the ones that are not horror, because these two that I just mentioned are not horror.
Oh yeah, all of them. Yeah, we have listeners who watch plenty of other genres, just like we do. So yeah, all good.
You got to add the Batwoman from 1968 to the
Hell
list.
yeah, more than add that. So let's talk about Carlos Ancira. He plays Elmer or Elmer. I'm not sure exactly.
Elmer, yes.
Elmer. Okay. So he often played henchman roles, one where he had some sort of physical deformity, like Mysteries of Black Magic. He's in that one. And he also, what I thought was interesting, his first credit that comes up on Letterboxd is for Jodorowsky's Fando and Lis, 1968. He was actually the narrator for that.
Exactly. He was also one thing that people don't remember is he was a really good teacher. He's very well regarded as an acting teacher in Mexico. A lot of actors went through him, and although everybody remembers him as a character actor, I think he was very gifted. Like the way he played Elmer at the end, him being possessed by Masali,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know. He also the makeup. He brought it to life. I think he sometimes with the people with mask when they're using mask, I think they just they let the mask do the work. But in this case, I think he went all the way, and Mendes probably just let him go because he's just fantastic. I know that you and I mentioned that at some point that he almost takes control of the film at the last end.
Yeah. This is his film.
Well, it's interesting too that he was an acting coach or an acting teacher, because he does present like his mannerisms. They're very kind of silent movie actor. Like they're so kind of, he doesn't need words. He's acting so well. You can feel pain when he's not speaking, and it works incredibly well too. When you have makeup on your face, it's hard to emote any type of or visualize any type of emotions. But yeah, him as Elmer is just amazing.
Oh yeah.
He has such a distinguished look about him too, even before adding the makeup. I mean,
I was going to say that he has a very peculiar face, and I think that's why he probably got all the other roles as the henchman and Mad Doctor's assistant and that kind of thing. And on a funny note, he was the cousin of one of the most important entertainers of Latin America, a singer called Jorge Negrete, who usually appears as, he's like the prototype of the macho singing cowboy in Mexico, the mariachi, good looking, the big mustache. He was his cousin. Yeah. And he doesn't look at all like that. So I find that fascinating as well. The extremes going from the prototype of the macho man from Latin America to Carlos Ancira, who's such a special character.
One other person, there's a few other people in the film, obviously. Beatrice Aguirre plays Rosario, mostly dramas in her filmography. Frank Coleman's commentary mentioned that she actually did the dubbing for Angela Lansbury.
That I didn't know. That's
Murder, She Wrote and stuff.
Just, for whatever, Angela Lansbury showed up and she was like the dubber for her, I guess.
I guess it wouldn't be Murder, She Wrote.
But... Yeah. So one that I did want to be sure to talk about, though, because you had kind of hinted at this story when we talked before Abraham, was Gaston Santos, who plays Dr. Eduardo Jimenez.
Okay, Gaston Santos is a very important name to mention. When we talk about Alameda Films, the production entity of this film, Alameda Films launched the career of this man. He was 26 years old when he started in films in 1956, and he's actually a bullfighter. And he comes from a very illustrious family, and the illustrious I say in quotations. His father was a well-known general politician and landowner in Mexico. He was very active in the revolution, was in power struggles all throughout his life, and he was up to his death a very important man in politics in Mexico. And Gaston was, he came from money, and he was very rich, and he didn't need to kind of go into the movie business. But the story that the producer Alfredo Ripstein tells is that Alfredo Ripstein really liked guns. And one day he was at his gunsmith's office and he saw a framed picture that had an autograph. And he said, "Who's that man?" And he says, "Oh, it's Gaston Santos. He's a bullfighter." And he mentions Ripstein that he said, "This man has to be in movies. He looks really, really good." So they contacted him and he said, "Man, I'm going to launch your career as an actor." And he said, "Really? I'm not sure what I can do." And he says, "We're going to do Westerns with you. You're going to be great with Westerns." Because, of course, you can ride the horse. He's extremely good, a proficient at that. Even his horse got into the deal. His horse was named Rayo de Plata, Ray of Silver. And he was, in the posters for all the cowboy movies he did with Ripstein, they actually put the horse in the billing in the poster as well. Wow. And it was Ripstein who came up with this idea of Rayo de Plata, because it was his idea that they needed to do cowboy movies in Mexico but that actually followed the cowboy model from the United States, because as they wanted to go away from the ranchera movies, which were like the Mexican cowboy films that always had music, because they were interested in breaking into other markets. And apparently, these cowboy films, he did 11 films. Gaston did 11 films with Alameda Films, and he did like 9, I think, that were cowboy films, and they did really well. They also were the first color films that they made, Alameda made, and they were more expensive, but they got their money back. And apparently, they made good money in Europe, following this tradition of like cowboy movies made in the American style, but made in Mexico. And it was interesting that after a while, after 9 of these movies, Gaston just said, "You know what, Mr. Ripstein, I don't like doing movies anymore. I want to go back to just my bullfighting and my business." And he quit movies. He stopped doing movies. I mean, he has like 3 more titles in the late 70s, but they were just like cameos and stuff. And later in his life, he actually shot someone, and they tried to put him in jail, but he got off of that. So there was a problem with some property, and in between the talks, he just pulled out a gun and shot the guy.
But he got off because he has money, I'm assuming?
Well, he had not only money, he had connections.
Yeah, that'll do it.
I mean, we have to say it. His dad was like Mr. Gaston Enes Santos was like one of those colorful characters they could have made 10 movies about.
Okay.
Like big time. Like he there's like his dad has a biography that is like like 5 bricks together. It's like huge.
Oh wow.
He has all his adventures from politics and the revolution, everything, and there's very colorful moments.
Okay. Well, very colorful. If anyone wants to look him up as well.
He looks very. I mean, he does have the kind of good looks, and he's very blonde, and I mean, he doesn't look Mexican at all. And I'm sure that's one of the things that Mr. Ripstein kind of said. He's going to be a good box office draw. He even mentions in his memoirs that the casting of him as Dr. Jimenez in this movie was kind of forced. I mean, he felt that it was not great for the part, but that he needed him in order to bring people into the film, because he knew that the good looks were going to attract people.
Yeah, he's first billed on it in like on Letterboxd and IMDb, like credit wise, and I'm like,
it's the least impressive role, I think, in the whole, cast. Yeah. But he does the job. I mean, he does the job well. Him and Patricia look great together.
Sure.
In their scenes. But,
yeah.
They look cute, but it's true that he's like he doesn't have the gravitas and the intensity of Dr. Bertrand, nor the kookiness and craziness that Elmer that Ancira brings to the role. I don't want to spoil, but when he does something to Elmer, I always get mad. I'm like, no, don't do anything to Elmer.
Yeah, no, we can. Yeah, you can spoil. You're fine. So one of the last doctor in this is Dr. Aldama, played by Antonio Raxel. This guy has over 250 acting credits.
Unfortunately, of him, I don't have that many. I don't have stories to tell you, unfortunately. But one of the things I want to do mention is that he looks very much like the actor that played Dracula, Germán Robles. And I do think it's a conscious decision. This film is right. It's after Dracula, and I'm sure this was a conscious decision. I don't know if from the producer or Mendes, to try to emulate some of the things that they knew had worked with audiences. And I think that it's kind of a formula of sorts. I'm thinking.
Yeah.
He doesn't have. I mean, he even has a cape every time he appears as a ghost. He has a cape on. Angular, thin face. So I do feel there's kind of sort of like a formulaic casting thing going on there.
I can see that for sure. Anybody else in the cast that you wanted to bring up?
I think that's it. I mean, I mentioned Luis Aragon, which is Dr. Gonzalez, who is kind of like the second fiddle to Dr. Bertrand, who plays in the skeleton of Dr. Morales, of Mr. Morales. No, the skeleton of Mrs. Morales. I'm sorry. Like so much. He played in the Brainiac and Muñecos Diabólicos, the infernal doll people. And I think he does a pretty good job. I love that he has all these moments where he wants to say something to Dr. Masali, but he doesn't say anything, and I think he lives to regret it. I
think when it comes to the performances in this, I think that Dr. Mazzali is great because of he's just so obsessed, like you mentioned, Abraham, and Patricia and Dr. Jimenez, they're fine, but really to me, this movie is all about Elmer, and I know Lance, you like this character in it too. I know we can't say the word gypsy anymore, but that's
Well, Gypsy
she.
Woman, right? That's how they call
Yeah,
her.
she's
Yeah.
credited as La Gitana,
Okay.
and so so for listeners, I'm not like using that word. I'm just that's what she's credited as. So there, I'm leaving it at
She's
that.
called a gypsy in the movie. Well, in the English
I
subtitles,
know,
yeah.
but like people are like, you can't say that word. I'm like, I'm sorry. Like that's what she's
She's
called.
the music box maniac.
She is.
No, I love her.
That's actually a fantastic description.
She's so good in it. I mean, and then like when her and Elmer sort of come to a head at the end because so I'm assuming most people who are listening have already watched this movie, but Dr. Mazzali and Dr. Aldama they have a pact that if whoever dies first will find a way to contact the other and let them know about the afterlife. The doctor who does die, he goes to visit his daughter Patricia as a spirit and gives her this key and says, "Here, deliver this." And that essentially leads to a series of events. Just by having this key, it opens a box, which puts a knife on a table, and it leads to this is ultimately going to lead to Dr. Aldama getting blamed for a murder.
Dr.
Um,
Masali, Dr. Masali.
Dr. Mazzali, thank you. Getting blamed for a murder, but because he has, I'm skipping over so much stuff. Gypsy woman, I'm going to say it. Sorry, folks. She gets loose from the mental asylum and she spills acid on Elmer's face, and he's like an orderly there. He ends up dying after he kills the gypsy woman because with the knife that I'm so all over the place with my summary. I should have written something.
I mean, I've seen it, so I'm following along.
You're following,
really
okay?
well,
You've seen it, okay. Anyway, basically, Elmer dies. He gets buried. Then Dr. Mazzali gets hanged. Sorry, Dr. Mazzali gets hanged at the gallows, and then his spirit goes into Elmer. So then Elmer rises from the grave. And so if you see the trailer, you see a hand shooting out of the grave. It's a fantastic shot. Elmer is, as now Dr. Mazzali's spirit in him. And it's so good.
And it just goes nuts over that.
It does.
Can I do something? Just if you need it, I mean, if you can use it. There's a beautiful summary of the movie that every Mersoy wrote in Fantastic Fest when they showed it there. Can I just read that? And
yeah, even better. Yeah, I'm going to
like
delete my whole one, and we're just going to have this summary.
It goes like this. Dr. Masali runs an asylum from the criminally insane, but his real interest lies in lifting the veil between this world and the afterlife. With his colleague Dr. Almada, he makes a pact. Whichever doctor dies first will return from the afterlife and share its secrets with the other. However, it won't be long before the doctors discover that the secrets of life and death are not to be trifled with, and the real horror of their existence will dawn on them. I think Evrim did a gorgeous job with that.
That's way better than me jumping all over the place.
Everin's pro. I mean, he knows what he's doing.
I know, and I'm just like, and then she spills the acid on his face, and yeah.
I mean, I think we should tell people this movie what it has. I think it has these grand guignol elements because the emotions go really hardcore and destructive about wanting to pour acid on people's faces. Mm-hmm. There's this thing of being disfigured, and if you don't love me, I'm going to disfigure you. Which it's intense. It's black with obsessive, nasty stuff. I mean, the emotions of this are like, they don't call it the black pit of Dr. M for nothing. It just goes, it goes really dark. And I love also there's something people don't talk about a lot, but this idea of a doctor, like a scientist, being obsessed with what lies beyond, and this fringe thing of like 2 minutes after the guy dies, he's doing a seance with a medium in an insane asylum to kind of summon the doctor, the death doctor.
Yeah, I found that fascinating too, because usually in most cases in movies like this, if there's any type of plot involving an afterlife, it's pretty much due to like a black magic or like seances. But I love how in Dr. M, it's kind of all in the name of science. They're looking at it from the scientific angle. It's a scientific experiment that Masala and Aldamar have worked together. So I think that's a fascinating part of the story and how it was written.
And everything happens so quickly too. Like you mentioned, like 2 minutes after he's dead, he's like, "Oh, got to get in a seance." Like he's not even buried yet. And then when Dr. Masala is hanged, and then immediately his spirit enters into Elmer, and Elmer wakes up. Like it's like, no, we're not. It's very economical in that sense. Like we're not going to waste time and like have time pass, and then now he wakes up. I love that aspect of it too.
It's a contained movie, no? I mean, basically, it's like in the mental asylum. There's the exterior that I mentioned, like the graveyard,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's a church. That's it. And I think it helps also a lot to kind of keep it contained and obsessive. Well, we're forgetting about the nightclub, the concert cafe,
Right? Yeah.
which I think opens up the movie in a very weird way.
It's
like
beautiful.
A dream sequence. Like it doesn't seem real at all.
That's what I thought when I first watched it. I was like, is someone dreaming?
Am I watching Bergman now?
One of the other, beautiful scenes in this, and I kind of already mentioned, I want to come back to it, is when Dr. M is hanged at the gallows. It is gorgeous. Like it's backlit. You don't see anyone's face. It's just, it's one of those things where that it's low budget, but it looks better because of that. Because if it had been like all lit and like you see everything, it's like it looks so much better with that just one source of light from the back.
Yeah. It's Gerso and Herrera and Mendes just working their magic with what they have. And it looks so beautiful.
And Dr. Masali losing it at that moment, I think it gets really intense as well, no? Because he has this thing of like, I'm going to die, but I want to see it. And because he keeps, if I'm not mistaken, he keeps thinking that something miraculous is going to happen that will will stop the execution. And he's just nuts at that moment. The manic energy he carries, I think, entangles with the beautiful extreme photography, and also like the light coming directly to the lens, just being interrupted by the gallows. It's just, I mean, you don't see that kind of stuff. I remember the first time I saw that, I was like, okay, Mexican movies usually don't look like this. And I'm like, I think that's one of the things that is beautiful about this film is like, you feel that it's bold. I mean, there's bold choices in it. At the beginning, at the very beginning, there's these moments, you see there's top shots to the doctor, like the moon is almost looking down upon him, and then he looks up. This thing of like, I don't want to say the godly, but there's something bigger, no, that looks down upon him. And if and the movie's kind of bookended by this like narration about asking about the afterlife, and even quotes the Bible, St. Luke, I think, something like that. It gives it this transcendental spiritual quality that I think blends itself perfectly to these Gothic elements that we were talking about.
That and just some of the other like atmospheric elements of it. You mentioned like there is a scene in the graveyard during the day, but like the opening death and when they have all the torches like all around when they're burying the doctor, scenes like that cut right into a seance, and it's just mood the whole movie, and whether it's like manic or dreary or manic from either Dr. M or manic from Elmer or manic from the music box, what did you call her, Maniac?
Yeah, music box mate.
Hell yeah, that's her name now.
And the violin playing we're forgetting, which is I think very important also plot wise, no?
Yeah.
How that brings up this like, because this manic energy I think is also mirrored by the violin playing, and that's how they, at some point for our listeners, that's how they realize that the doctor has come back into Elmer's body, because you see Elmer all disfigured playing the violin like only Dr. Masali was able to, and it's fantastic. It's a beautiful detail. Beautiful.
Yeah, to go back to the pacing, I mean, the progression of the film to me is really fascinating because I love how it shifts focus pretty much across all these lead characters. First, it's Masali and a scientific desire, to take his spirit to the afterlife, bring it back again to live in the flesh. Then it's that, quick shot to that cafe or the place where Patricia's dancing, and it becomes her journey for a short while. And then it pretty much turns into Elmer when he's burned. And then to applaud the pacing again. The movie does such a great job when there's a discussion with Dr. Masala and Patricia. He's trying to have her stay and work on potentially as a nurse. So they do this genius way of having time pass, which is there's that discussion, and then we cut to Elmer's disfigured face being revealed, and Masala telling him, "Oh, your burns have healed." So as the viewer, we know, okay, it's been roughly 2 weeks, so we're on, it's November 15th. The shit's going to hit the fan now. But then then it jumps from Elmer to the gypsy, and then there's those scenes where she's running around after she escapes, and then back to Masala, who gets hanged. I mean, it does a fascinating job of you get a good idea of every single character that's presented, except kind of Dr. Jimenez, who's just kind of in the background.
I mean, yeah, he's there to look pretty, and that's fine. I love the Music Box Maniac, her escape, and she's just like chiseling away at like the crumbling wall, and like just pulls the door off of it. Like, yeah, it's so good.
It's beautiful, and her close-ups. No, I think it's one of those moments where I think they really they realize just There's this quote, I think it's from Bergman, that is said that, the best special effect in cinema is an actor's face. And, every time I see the close-ups of both, Dr. Masali, our Music Box Maniac, and Elmer, the close-ups here, they're just like, they say so much, and they're so gorgeous. Even Mappy Cortez also, when, those close-ups of her when she's watching Elmer coming to him, coming to her, kind of cornering her, and she's all scared. Oh my God.
Yeah. That's when she does work for me. The rest of it, when it's being kind of a love story with her, she's there to move the plot forward for that reason. But like once Dr. M's soul, or whatever we want to call it, is in Elmer, and so Dr. M has fallen in love with her and he wants her to be with him, when he finally kidnaps her and is going to disfigure her, then you finally see some sort of terror out of her. Because kind of before that, it's just a little bit like, oh, I don't know why I'm here. And, oh, yeah, I like you. And, oh, you're so nice to me. And she's there. She's fine. I'm not criticizing.
I mean, she's the ingenue, and she's like, she's not very convincing, but I think at those moments, as you well said, she really shines, no? And I think her eyes that we were talking about, her gorgeous eyes, really, come through, and the fear, and that moment of, I remember when we showed this at Fantastic Fest, and I was talking about it during my presentation. It was like, that's when you get this idea of like, the toxic men of Mexico kind of really cornering a woman. It's like, it's all there.
Yeah.
Well, I did want to bring up, speaking of at the end, when Dr. Masala is in Elmer's body and he's going to pour, once again, we might get another chemical burn to the face. He wants to have Patricia love only him. So he's essentially going to disfigure her. Abraham, I watched a lot of Mexican horror and, non-horror movies this past week. Curse of the Crying Woman, Rene Cordona's Doctor of Doom, The Batwoman. All of these have scenes where the doctors are usually, or, somebody's disfigured with some sort of acid or chemical. It seems to be a very common theme. And I get very excited when it's happening on screen. I'm like, yes, another one. It seems to be a common thing in these stories. I don't know if that's something that you've seen or
Absolutely. No, yes. And I'm delighted that you mentioned it. To me, it's been one of the things, all these ideas of face disfigurement, it's a running thing through a lot of these Mexican movies, and I respond very well to them. I don't know what that says about us, I have to say. But this fear of like, rearrangement of the flesh, I think it's at the heart of so many of these mad doctors' ideas. And I keep thinking of The Eyes Without a Face, which is one of my favorite films of all time. And I think that there's something here with Mexican directors at least kind of tapping into the idea that the fragility of the body, and also the idea of the corruption of beauty, which I think is kind of at the bottom of all these tendencies, no? Of like, if I cannot have this beauty, I will destroy it, which kind of goes to this very macho man tendency all around Mexico. I mean, if we talk about the Mexican the level of feminicides in Mexico is horrible, and the macho attitudes here are like still in this 21st century are still so ingrained and so difficult to like educate and kind of subdue. And I think one of the wonderful things about horror films is that subconscious comes out all the time, and I think it speaks to that, no, the inability of, if we cannot have the beauty or we cannot just watch it, there's the need to destroy it. I think that's what happens.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
I hate you for saying this, but I do feel it comes out like that because, as you said, it shows up in tons of Mexican films as the bad doctors wanting to destroy the beauty they cannot possess.
That's a great answer to that. I mean, a great observation.
Abraham, any other points you want to make about the film before we get to our double feature Rex?
There's something about, you mentioned the burial, and one of the things, it's funny how, remember how we said that all Mexican film critics, all the academics who usually despise horror films in our national cinematography, at least they always mention the vampire as a highlight. And within the film, they always mention there's a big burial scene in the vampire, and they mention it as as the moment. No, I think by this time when Mendes did this, he had already done the vampire and everything. And I think this is a distillation. That burial scene at the very beginning is wonderful, and it's one of those. I don't know, what was the last time you saw someone buried? No, it's not something that we see very these days. Anyhow. Now we're used to incineration, and it's kind of like, I don't know, this idea of death is being more sanitized more and more, I think. But I love that in this film that you actually see that the earth falling on the coffin, and it's dirty, and there's like the torches, and there's like the voices of like the praying going on, and I think it grows on that, and I think creating that ambience of burial, of the ritual of death, helps so much. And there's something here that we have. I mean, that's something that's still very close to Mexico. The whole idea of the rituals of death, and I think that's something that permeates in this film wonderfully. I mean, they take it to an extreme, but also, as you remember at the end, there's this thing where they're like the two women are at the house. They have the picture of the doctor and the two candles, and then you see the shadow of Dr. Aldama that shows up, and it's the shadow that turns off the candles. Do you remember that?
And knocks the photo over.
Because it's one of those simple things, and yes, low budget and everything, but it's just brilliant. A shadow turning off the candle and then kind of pushing the picture of Dr. Masali. Oof, I love that moment. It's just one of those little things that I'm just, I think it's just magical. It encapsulates this like otherworldly and ghosts, and I love when ghosts are shown in different they're either corporeal or they're just like abstract showings, and just having the shadow of a ghost is not something that we usually see, and I love that.
Me too.
On that note, on the candles and ghosts, there's a Spanish movie that is going to come out this year called La Abuela, the Grandmother, by Paco Plaza. And there's a gorgeous moment with a candle. Just when you watch that, remember this that I told you.
I will.
The Grandmother by Paco Plaza. Gorgeous.
I'm going to do that Leonardo DiCaprio meme, pointing at it from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
That's exactly. Yes. You when you see it, you'll be like, okay, yeah, that's it.
That's what Abraham was talking about.
All right. Let's get to our double feature recommendations. So, Abraham, you're our guest. I would love to start with you. So, we talked a little bit beforehand, and you mentioned like you had a few ideas about what would you pair as a double feature with this.
I think we could go three ways. If we wanted to go on a very academic recommendation, just to give an idea of the work of Fernando Mendes and his crew, because I think it's very important. I think all of us tend to over applaud directors and forget about all the other people behind it. And films are not done by one person; it's the group. So on those terms, I think an incredible feature would be The Body Snatcher, the film that Fernando Mendes did with Victor Herrera and Gunter Gerso, and it's the first luchador film to mix horror together with the Black Pit of Dr. M, so that people could see like a before and after. and kind of the start of a collaboration, and then the second example as a culmination of that, I think that would be wonderful for a more academic point of view. If we wanted to go more bonkers, which is my preferred mode of viewing, I think it would be great to have Black Pit of Dr. M along with Hellbound 2. Why is that?
Yes.
Both of
Okay.
them happen at insane asylums. Both of them have at the heart of it a doctor that is obsessed with wanting more, to learn more about the afterlife, and kind of not content with life, not content with what life offers. And by transgressing nature, I guess, or just the boundaries of our existence, everything goes shitwire. No? So I think because at the heart of it, it's the same story if you look at it very loosely, because, I mean, they go very different directions, but I think they follow the same path.
Oh,
Yeah,
totally.
absolutely.
I'm kicking myself for not thinking of that.
I actually was thinking of Hellraiser. I didn't think of Hellbound 2, Hellraiser 2, but I thought of Hellraiser because of the whole, not necessarily reincarnation, but coming back from the afterlife.
Yeah.
That's a great pick.
But Hellbound, it's just, I remember that the doctor is like, gets so obsessed,
Yes.
with the story
That's
that I forget the name of the survivor of the film, but that he even brings the mattress to his office, remember? And he starts doing all these crazy experiments there, and it reminded me. I was like, yeah, they thematically kind of go together.
That's so good.
So
Yeah.
those would be my two recommendations.
Yeah.
The
Black.
third one, more in the long shot, would be to pair Black Pit of Dr. M with Mysteries of Black Magic, which is from the same year, and it has the same DP. And this one is directed by Miguel M. Delgado, and there's a further connection. At some point, Mr. Mendes brought a lawsuit upon Mr. Miguel M. Delgado, the director of the other movie, not because of this, but because he took a screenplay that he had written for Cantinflas, and he turned it on as his own. And he said, "Man, this is the same fucking thing I wrote." He won some money after that, and so I think it's kind of like it's a silly thing to do, but I would pair those two together, not because of the lawsuit, but because these two are, I think, some of the best Gothic Mexican films in black and white, and both of them have this preoccupation on the afterlife and with people that are doubtful, that are like, no, there's nothing, it's fine. And I mean, in very different examples, but there's preoccupation with the afterlife, with the esoteric, with the spiritual, and shit ends badly for both of them at the end. So yes, so I think those would be my three avenues of choice.
I like it.
Well, I'm going to piggyback on that because Mysteries of Black Magic was my pick as well.
Yeah.
And just to compound to what Abraham said, it does have it's photographed by Victor Herrera. Gunther Gerso is the art director. Carrion does the original score again. And Elmer's in it, who plays like this creepy sidekick with his crazy ears.
He's so good.
Right? Yes, he's a sidekick to the mental, not mental woman. I would say
to the witch or the
mentalist or psychic.
You should watch, Erica. You should watch that movie if you can. Also, you're gonna love it.
You've seen it.
Oh, I've seen it. Yeah, I love it. It's not my pick though. I got a different one.
I totally love when I get in a foul mood when I cannot work. I usually put the beginning of that movie to kind of get into the mood.
Nice.
I just love it so much.
So yeah, I mean, like Mysteries of Black Magic focuses more on the occult and astrology, but there's kind of this really fun and interesting scientific breakdown of like how astrological predictions can affect one's mortality and morality. So the scientific approach concerning talismans and witchcraft, which are dominant in Mysteries of Black Magic, to me, I found similarities with Dr. Aldama's and Masala's viewpoints on their scientific experiment involving the afterlife and Black Pit of Dr. M. And there's, reincarnation element too. So that's kind of where I drove a lot of, other than the academic view of, the crew and stuff and the cast. Mm-hmm. It just, like you said, Abraham, I think they both pair so perfectly together. I think they're just gorgeous 1950s Mexican horror films just to watch back to back. So
nice.
I was thinking of JD's Revenge, though.
JD's Revenge would be kind of like in the vein of Hellraiser or Hellbound. Yeah. That's like another bonkers pick that it's like, yeah, that actually makes perfect sense, even though it's completely different.
that'd be my backup too. JD's Revenge, the whole reincarnation stuff
Nice.
with JD Walker. What about you, Erica? What's your pick?
I went through a few options. I was initially thinking it would work well with something like The Witch's Mirror, that kind of has a little bit of a kitchen sink element. It's got a ghost story, revenge beyond the grave, and then it turns to a mad scientist. And so it's got a lot of those elements, and it's another just great Mexican horror film. I love it. I even thought Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell could work.
Yeah.
You've got him in an asylum, a mad scientist obsessed with life and death. And of course, you can't go wrong with those Hammer flicks from that era either, just like you can't go wrong with Mexican horror flicks from this era. So I ultimately did decide to go with another Mexican horror film, specifically one where music plays a key role in the film, like it does in Black Pit with the music box and the violin. This one's a little bit different in how music plays into it, though. So I decided to go with The Man and the Monster from 1959, directed by Rafael Baladon. Basically a Faustian movie. A pianist makes a deal with the devil to become the greatest musician in the world, but the catch is that he turns into a monster whenever he plays. And the monster makeup, I saw a bunch of reviews from people, and people are mean when it comes to these movies. Like, the makeup is silly, but it's great at the same time. Like, what I'm talking about. Like,
well, I watched The Brainiac, and that's
okay, yeah. So it's like that. It's still so good. So, and it's like this idea of like the idea of obsession, just like Dr. M, being obsessed with this woman or being obsessed with the afterlife and all of that. This man is obsessed with like being the best, and it costs him his life. And so I think that musical element too is kind of the main connective tissue that I like about both of
That's
those.
good. Yeah, I was going to pick Curse of the Crying Woman, which was actually Baladon directed as well, isn't it? I think it's
yes.
Yeah. We're all kind of listing these options and stuff, but there's so many good pairings for the Black Pit of Dr. M.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
I think that Erica, yours is really you're onto something, definitely on the music thing and the obsession with the woman. I think those third lines are really good. I hadn't thought of those, but yeah, I like that a lot.
I like all of these double features, and I would like to watch all of them.
In Austin, also, the beautiful thing that I remember is that it's so friendly to these, the audiences there are so friendly to these pairings and to these experiences. Yeah. I found it so welcoming, really. Like, that was one of my most favorite things. I was a bit scared when I remember we were showing these movies there, and then I saw the reactions of the audience. I was like, okay, this is fertile ground.
Yeah. All right, Abraham, where can people follow you, find anything that you're working on, or social media or anything like that?
Okay, you can find me in Instagram. It's a bit exotic, my name there. Aullidos Panteoneros. How do you spell that? My God, it is AULLIDOS Panteoneros, PANTEONEROS, and that translates as graveyard howls, which is kind of I love that name. Let me tell you a little story how that comes about. My great grandfather, turns out, was obsessed with cemeteries and death. He has there's like a little book that he kept where he wrote poetry and did drawings, and it's all about death, cemeteries, and leaving people that are dead coming back to their loved ones and telling them stories and that. And for some reason, I got obsessed with that. From those stories, my grandmother used to tell them. And fortunately, now I have that book. And when I started doing this, programming and everything, I was like, I have to create a character of sorts to kind of go on into this. And I picked that. The Graveyard House, Aullidos Panteoneros. So in Instagram, you can find me as that, and Twitter, I just go by Aullidos P, because the other they don't like long names there.
Yeah,
and that's where you can find me. Okay. Also, if people want to follow up on the whole Morbido experience, they can have the Morbido Fest. We have a webpage, the Instagram, the Twitter. That's where all the activities of the festival are listed, as well as all the ventures that we have. So people would follow, and follow the also Indicator, which is like very friendly to the Mexican horror film right now. And that
Great.
would be it.
All right. And you mentioned those two releases are coming in March from Indicator. That's correct?
Yes.
Awesome.
Especially, I think people are going to be interested to find, horror at the beginning of the Mexican film industry in Mexico. And the 30s was a gorgeous moment for horror in Mexico. And it's interesting because also there's, mummies, monks, La Llorona, were, kind of our pillar, one of our, most important cinema deities, showing up right there to start the genre. And the Indicator did a wonderful job with the releases, but not only the release, but also the restoration and getting these films out there. And they hadn't been available in this high quality in a long, long time. Especially, they hadn't been in Blu-ray, so it's going to be great. And I think hopefully the sales will be good, so more keep coming up.
Yeah, first of many. That'd be great.
Well, Abraham, thank you so much for joining us, sharing all of your extensive knowledge about not just this film, but everyone involved with it, films of this era. I think our listeners learned a lot from it as well.
Thank you both, Eric and Lance. I love the job that you guys are doing, unearthing movies that are not watched, and making sure people kind of scratch the corners of other places. I think it's very important in these times where movies are getting cornered to the streaming platforms that people look elsewhere. I think all us that are from another generation where everything was not as easily available, one of the joys of liking films was to look for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And kind of finding them. So I think that, with the thing that you're doing of talking about these films that are underlooked, it forces people also to investigate and to kind of go into these paths of research, finding a copy and everything. And I think it's very exciting to have that back. So I want to thank you guys and really applause on you, and also looking at filmographies from other parts of the world. I love that that you have this passion for the Mexican horror films. I love it, and it makes me very happy because sometimes I feel like I'm crazy doing this stuff. Validates not only the work but the passion, and it's very important. And I know you guys must feel this also when you talk to other people that love this stuff as well. But the fact that this love for this type of cinema binding you to other people and with the same obsessions, it's a lovely feeling.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and like for our listeners who, if you haven't dived into Mexican horror, as soon as you watch your first one, you're hooked. They are just so much fun.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
Thank you so much again, Abraham, for joining us and talking about these films and Mexican cinema.
Thank you so much, and viva unsung horrors.
Yes.
Thank you, Abraham.
You're listening to the Prescribed Films Podcast Network, home to hundreds of hours of free podcast entertainment. The shows on this network all have a common goal, providing you with the best discussions about movies and other forms of entertainment media. The PFPN hopes to fill your earholes with audio joy. Visit our website with links to all the other amazing shows at www.thepfpn.com. Thanks for listening.
All right, Lance, next movie.
Okay, we're jumping ahead almost 40 years. Okay, I'm picking a sci-fi horror that was released during your favorite decade. That's right. That sci means the 90s.
Fuck.
We're covering Creatures from the Abyss, also known as Plankton, released from 1994, directed by Alvaro Passeri. It's about a group of 5 young friends who head out for a boating trip off the coast of Florida. After realizing they forgot to bring gas for their boat, they're stranded at sea and caught in a powerful storm. They drift up to an abandoned yacht in the middle of the ocean, and once they climb aboard, they discover a mysterious biological lab on the ship and find these mutated prehistoric fish running around on the yacht. And then it gets nuts. Marine murder mayhem ensues.
I just looked it up. Okay, it's Italian. I feel better about it being in the 90s if it's Italian.
Yeah, it is Italian made, so the dubbing is, entertaining all on its own. It has some gnarly practical effects, which we'll talk about. And I have seen this popping up on Letterboxd the last 6 months or so from people I follow. So I feel like it's on the brink of, reaching an audience and getting over that 1,000 Letterboxd views that we have in place.
Yeah.
As of this recording, Creatures from the Abyss has 756 views. You can find it on YouTube. You can search either Plankton, 1994, or Creatures from the Abyss. There are actually 2 DVD releases by Shriek Show. One of just the film alone that was released in 2005, and Shriek Show released it again in 2007 as part of its Mutant Monsters triple feature with The Dark and Jackie Kong's The Bean.
Oh, okay.
But again, it's on YouTube. That's our next movie.
All right.
You ready?
Yeah, I'm like I said, 90s, I was like, God fucking damn it. But then it's Italian, so now I feel better. I'm ready for it.
Okay. You better be, because it's happening.
I'm ready. We're
Don't
doing
show
it.
up and be like, I didn't watch it.
I'm going to knock the microphone over and be like, fuck it,
You're like, Lance, that's the shittiest pick to follow up the Black Pit of Dr. M. Come on.
I mean, there's no way that it's worse than Bloodsucking Pharaohs in Pittsburgh. So,
yeah, that pick I think was. I mean, yeah, I'm still looking for something that can beat.
Don't do that to me.
No, I won't. I mean, I've watched movies that I think could.
We've been doing this long enough. You know that like you will piss off Erica if you do a dumb horror comedy.
But I might find somebody's favorite movie. I mean, at the same time.
You have to consider me too. Me first. Audience second.
Okay, let's not argue in front of our kids.
Fine. I'm sorry. All right. Like I mentioned earlier in the episode, I will be putting together a list on Letterboxd of all the films we mentioned in this, because I knew it kind of going in that there would be a lot, but there was a lot more than I thought it would be. So
a list is a smart idea.
Just to make it easier for folks to reference some stuff that we talked about in that. So you can check that out in show notes. If you're not already, you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and Slasher, all at Unsung Horrors. You can follow me on Letterboxd, Twitter, and Instagram at Hex Massacre. And we'll also have links to where you can follow Abraham, because I know he spelled it out, but you guys probably didn't have a pen ready. So we'll put that in there where you can follow him, and Morbido Fest as well.
And you can find me on Twitter, Letterboxd, and Instagram at LShivey.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. We hope you learned a lot. I know both Lance and I did.
Yes.
And we'll see you next episode for Plankton.
Yes, Creatures from the Abyss.
Hell yeah. Night, y'all.
Bye.